Darren Whitmore never stopped in the middle of Manhattan until the morning he collided shoulder first with a woman carrying a cardboard tray of coffee cups that exploded between them like a caffeine bomb. "Damn it," she gasped, stumbling back as coffee splashed down her coat and onto the sidewalk. Darren looked down, stunned, his tailored charcoal wool suit now dripping with dark roast. Horns blared around them, people rushed past, but for one strange second all he could focus on was the woman glaring up at him with wide hazel eyes and chestnut hair pulled into a messy ponytail. Her nose was pink from the cold, and her mouth hung open in horror. "I'm so sorry," they both said at the same time. She blinked. "Wait, you're apologizing? You're the one who walked into me." "I wasn't looking," Darren admitted, tugging a monogrammed handkerchief from his pocket and handing it to her. "I was distracted." She hesitated, then took it. "I just bought these coffees for my boss. He's going to kill me. Let me fix it." Darren reached for her elbow, but she stepped back. "You've already done enough." He paused, eyebrows lifting. Most people either recognized him or at least backed off when he offered help. Not this woman. She was already crouching down to gather the tray and its soggy remains. "I'll buy you new ones." "Seriously," he said. "There's a cafe right there." 5 minutes. She looked up. "Why?" "Because I ruined your morning," he said simply. "And because you're the first person in a long time who looked me in the eye and didn't fake a smile." She stared at him like she was trying to figure out if he was being sincere. Then she sighed. "Fine. But only because it's freezing and I need caffeine." They ducked into the cafe on the corner. He held the door open for her, and she walked past him without a word. She didn't even glance at the watch on his wrist, platinum, worth more than a car. Didn't notice the way the barista nearly tripped over himself when Darren stepped up to the counter. She ordered 4 new drinks, and Darren paid without blinking. "You didn't need to do that," she said, folding her arms as they waited. "I wanted to," he replied. "What's your name?" She hesitated, then said Mira Olson. "Darren," he said, reaching out a hand. She shook it quickly, then pulled back. "Well, Darren, you've done your good deed for the day. Thanks for the coffee. You're just gonna walk out?" Mira gave him a look. "What else would I do?" "Let me walk you back," he offered. She gave a short laugh. "Pretty sure you've already made me late." "I own a watch company," he said with a small smile. "I can vouch for the time." She tilted her head. "Wait, you work at W&C? My boss wears your watches." "The ones with the sapphire backs." "I'm the CEO." Myra's eyebrows shot up. "Of Whitmore and Cole?" He nodded. "You're joking." He pulled back the cuff of his suit jacket. The logo gleamed on his wrist. She blinked. "You bumped into me at a crosswalk and you're a CEO?" "I'm a lot of things," he said. "Right now, I'm someone who's glad he wasn't paying attention." They walked together the 3 blocks to her office, and he carried the tray the whole way. "That's it," she said, pointing to a tall, glass-fronted building. "Thanks again. For everything." Darren didn't want her to go. "Can I take you to lunch?" Mira blinked. "Seriously? Dead serious?" She looked suspicious. "Why?" "Because I want to know what kind of person calls me out in the middle of a street, then tells me I've done enough." A slow grin tugged at her lips. "You're ridiculous." He held up a hand. 1 hour. Lunch. Let me make up for the outfit I destroyed." She hesitated for a long second, then said, "Fine, but only if you promise not to crash into me again." He grinned. "No promises." Darren showed up at noon sharp in a black town car and opened the door for her himself. Mira stepped inside, looking surprised. "This isn't lunch," she said when the car pulled into the driveway of a rooftop restaurant overlooking Central Park. "It's lunch to me." They sat at a table with crisp white linens and a view that made her blink. "I feel like I'm in a movie," she muttered, scanning the menu. "You are," he said. "And you're the best part." She glanced at him, cheeks pink. "You don't even know me. I know you didn't ask for anything when I offered. That says a lot." Lunch passed too fast. Mira was sharp, funny, and didn't care about his money. She rolled her eyes when the server called him Mr. Whitmore and made fun of his menu pronunciation. "Who orders foie gras at noon?" she teased. "I do," he said. "But I'll trade you for your truffle fries." "Deal." When he dropped her back at her office, she paused with her hand on the door. "I had a nice time," she said. "But just so you know, I'm not the kind of girl who dates CEOs. Good thing I'm not the kind of CEO who gives up easily." She laughed, and this time she didn't stop him when he leaned in and brushed a kiss against her cheek. "I'll call you," he said. "I didn't give you my number." "I'll find you," he said, smiling. And he did. Over the next 2 weeks, Darren kept showing up. At the coffee shop, outside her office. Once, he sent a driver with a bouquet of peonies and a note that said, "No coffee spillage this time." "Dinner?" She said no. Then yes. Dinner was at a quiet Italian place he'd rented out just for the two of them. "I feel like a Bond girl," she said when the maitre d' greeted them by name. "You look better than any of them," Darren said without blinking. That night, when he walked her home, she let him kiss her. Really kiss her. After, she pulled back and whispered, "What are we doing?" "Falling," he said quietly. "And I don't want to stop." Mira didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. And Darren knew he'd never been more serious about anything in his life. Mira stood in the center of her tiny walk-up apartment, staring at the garment bag hanging from the back of her closet door as if it might bite. She hadn't touched it since Darren had sent it over 2 nights ago, dropped off by a professionally dressed assistant who offered no explanation beyond a polite, "Mr. Whitmore asked me to deliver this for the event." Event. She hadn't agreed to anything yet. Still, she unzipped the bag. Her breath caught. A floor-length gown in a deep midnight shade shimmered faintly under the bedroom lamp. The fabric was smooth and cool beneath her fingertips. The kind of dress that didn't belong in a cramped 5th-floor apartment with creaky floorboards and mismatched furniture. She picked up the card that had been tucked into the box beside it. "You promised me one yes. I'm cashing it in." She hadn't promised. Not in so many words. But she hadn't said no when he'd brushed a kiss along her jaw and whispered, "Let me show you my world." And maybe some small, reckless part of her wanted to see it. By the time the car arrived, Mira had nearly talked herself out of going 5 times. She almost didn't open the door when the driver knocked. But then she remembered the way Darren looked at her, not with expectation, but with something quieter, like he was waiting for her to decide. She stepped into the back seat. The car glided through the city, past the places she knew and the ones she couldn't afford to imagine. When they pulled up to the front of the Whitmore Foundation Gala, she was hit by a wave of camera flashes and a line of designer gowns moving up a velvet carpet. The driver opened her door. "Mr. Whitmore will meet you inside." She swallowed and stepped out. Inside, chandeliers glittered from a ceiling that stretched 2 stories high. Waiters moved like ghosts, silent and seamless, offering flutes of champagne. A string quartet played something elegant and unfamiliar. She felt the eyes before she saw him. Darren stood at the top of the staircase, dressed in a black tuxedo that fit like it had been stitched to his frame. His expression changed the moment he saw her. Something flickered across his face, sharp and unguarded. He descended the stairs slowly, like he was afraid she might vanish if he moved too fast. "You look like a secret I don't deserve to know," he said quietly when he reached her. "You didn't have to do all this," she replied, glancing around. "I didn't do it for you," he said. "The gala was already planned. But I did want you here, with me." "Why me?" she asked, voice low. He leaned closer. "Because you don't belong in a crowd that only knows how to look. You make people see." Her throat tightened, but she didn't look away. A tall woman in diamonds and red lipstick interrupted them. "Darren, the board is asking for you." He gave Mira an apologetic glance. "Will you be all right for a few minutes?" "I'll try not to break anything," she said. He touched her hand once before disappearing into the crowd. Mira wandered toward the edge of the room, taking in the swirl of elegance around her. She felt like a misplaced puzzle piece, her fingers tightening around the champagne flute she hadn't touched. First time, she turned to see a man in his 50s, salt and pepper hair, and a warm, amused smile. "Is it that obvious?" she asked. The way you're holding that glass like it might explode? A little, he said. I'm Grant Whitmore, Darren's uncle. Her eyebrows lifted. Oh, hi. I'm Mira. I know. He talks about you. She blinked. He does. Often. And with a look I haven't seen on him since before his father passed. Her expression shifted. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Grant nodded. It changed him. Made him harder. Quieter. But then you happened. I just spilled coffee on him, she said. Grant smiled. Sometimes the best things in life start with a mess. Before she could respond, Darren returned, slipping beside her like gravity had pulled him back. Everything all right? He asked. She nodded. I met your uncle. Grant raised his glass. She's a keeper. Darren looked at her, eyes unreadable. I know. Later, they stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The music faded, the laughter behind them distant. I don't belong here, Mira said, voice barely audible. He turned to face her. You don't. Not in this world of glass smiles and hollow names. But you belong with me. She shook her head. You don't even know what you're asking. I know exactly what I'm asking, he said. I'm asking you to give me a chance. She looked at him, her heart pounding in a rhythm she didn't trust. Why does it feel like you've already decided? She whispered. Because I did, he said. The second I saw you, standing in the middle of chaos, trying to hold everything together. She closed her eyes. I don't know how to do this. You don't have to, he said. You just have to let me try. His hand found hers, fingers threading together. And as the wind lifted the hem of her gown, Mira realized something terrifying. She wanted to. Darren adjusted his cufflink with a flick of his thumb, his attention only half on the quarterly board meeting unfolding in front of him. A number-crunching VP was droning on about projections, but Darren's mind had drifted far from spreadsheets and market shares. It had been 3 days since the gala. 3 days since Mira had stood on that balcony, torn between the life she knew and the one he was offering. She hadn't answered him that night, not with words. But her hand had stayed in his, and that had been enough. For the moment. Still, she hadn't returned any of his calls. He didn't blame her. He dragged her into a world that could chew up someone like her and spit her out with a polite smile and a press release. A world she hadn't asked to enter. Mr. Whitmore? One of the directors prompted, brow raised. Darren blinked, refocusing. Proceed. Expand the proposal. I want a full operations forecast on my desk by end of week. The meeting resumed, but he was already pulling up his schedule. He canceled his next 2 appointments and told his driver to get the car ready. Mira wasn't going to come to him. He needed to go to her. When he stepped into the narrow lobby of her office building, the receptionist looked up with wide eyes. I'm here for Mira Olson, Darren said. The woman blinked. She left early today. His jaw tightened. Do you know where she went? I think she said something about the museum on 5th. She volunteers there sometimes. Outside, the city pressed in like it always did, loud, impatient, endless, but Darren barely noticed. The car wove through traffic toward the museum, a stately building framed by stone lions and a staircase that stretched like a welcome mat for the city's most timeless artifacts. He spotted her before he even reached the steps. She was perched on the edge of a bench near the main entrance, her knees drawn up slightly, a sketchpad balanced on her lap. Her hair was pulled back tighter than usual, and a pencil moved quickly across the page. He didn't speak until he was close enough that her pencil stilled. I didn't know you could draw, he said quietly. Mira turned her head slowly. I didn't know you'd track me down. You didn't leave much choice. She closed the sketchpad and set it beside her. I needed space. I gave you that, he said. Now I need clarity. She tilted her head. Are you always this direct? When it matters. Yes. Mira looked down at her hands, then back up. I'm not used to any of this, Darren. I work in operations. I take the subway. I've never even owned a pair of shoes that cost more than $100. I don't care about any of that. Maybe not now, she said. But what happens when your world starts asking questions I can't answer? When I say the wrong thing at some event, or wear the wrong dress, or forget which fork to use? I don't want a mannequin who knows which fork to use, he said. I want you. She stood abruptly. You say that now, but I've seen how people look at me. Like I'm temporary. Like I'll disappear the second you get tired. He stepped in front of her, his voice low. You think this is temporary for me? I've built empires. I've survived scandals, lawsuits, and boardroom coups. But nothing's ever shaken me like you. She blinked, her throat working. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. This was my mother's. She wore it every day until she passed away. I haven't touched it since. Mira hesitated as he opened the pouch and revealed a delicate gold pendant shaped like a crescent moon. It wasn't flashy. It was quiet, elegant. I'm not giving it to you to prove anything, he said. I'm giving it to you because you're the first person I've trusted with something that mattered. Her fingers trembled as she touched the pendant. I don't know if I'm strong enough for your world. You don't have to be strong for it, he said. You just have to be strong with me. She looked up at him, eyes glistening. I don't want to lose myself. You won't, he said. I won't let you. They stood in silence for a long beat, the city humming around them. Then Mira took the pendant and fastened it around her neck with shaking hands. I don't want to be a secret, she said. You won't be, he promised. You'll be the only thing I say publicly that actually means something. They ended the night in Central Park, walking side by side as the paths wound beneath the trees. It wasn't planned. Nothing about the evening had been, but Darren had never needed plans with her. You know, Mira said as they paused near a quiet fountain, I used to think love was something people made up to sell chocolates. Still think that? He asked, stepping closer. Her voice was barely a whisper. No, he kissed her there, with the moonlight catching the gold at her throat, and for the first time in a long time, Darren felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Still, he knew this wasn't the end of their battle. Not in a world where whispers ran faster than facts, and where his name carried more weight than most headlines. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid of what came next. Because she wasn't running. And neither was he. The conference room was filled with glass, tension, and the scent of polished wood. Darren stood at the head of the table, his fingers resting lightly on the surface as the board members of Whitmore and Cole eyed him with a mix of curiosity and caution. Behind them, the skyline stretched wide and indifferent, the city humming 40 floors below. He hadn't intended to start the meeting like this. But when Mira's name had come up offhand, dismissive something in him snapped. No, he said, voice even but final. We're not altering the guest list. A man in a tailored navy suit leaned forward. Darren, with respect, the Paris delegation expects a certain level of they'll meet who I choose to introduce, Darren cut in. And I've chosen. Silence followed. Not the kind born from fear, but from recalculation. No one challenged Darren Whitmore directly, not unless they wanted to find themselves reassigned or quietly edged out by the next quarter. But this wasn't about company power plays. This was about her. He ended the meeting early and walked out without waiting for reaction. As the elevator doors shut, his reflection stared back tight-jawed, eyes sharp but clearer than it had been in years. He wasn't making space for Mira in his life. He was reshaping it around her. Later that afternoon, he found her at the Botanical Conservatory near the East River. She was crouched beside a row of orchids, carefully adjusting a tag on the display, oblivious to the fact that she was standing in the middle of what had become his favorite view. You always catch me when I'm elbow deep in something, she said without looking up. I like that about you, Darren replied. She rose slowly, brushing her hands on her jeans. I thought you had a meeting today. I did. Ended it early. Because of me? Because of us. Mira's expression shifted, not wary, just questioning. Is there an us now? There is, he said. And I'm done acting like I have to explain that to anyone. She blinked, but didn't look away. I told them you'd be joining me in Paris next week. Her eyebrows lifted. That's bold. I don't do halfway, Mira. You've seen that. What are we even doing in Paris? There's a gala, a business summit, a few meetings. But mostly, I want to show you the city the way no one else can. Not because I need to impress you. Because I want to share it with someone who doesn't look at it like a prize. She crossed her arms, considering. And if I say no? Then I'll cancel everything and stay here, he said simply. I'm not a condition you have to negotiate around. I know. You're a choice I want to keep making. A slow breath passed between them. No rush. No pressure. Just the truth laid bare. I'll need time off, she said finally. I already called your supervisor. You've got 10 days. Her mouth fell open slightly. You did what? She said she owed me a favor. Apparently, I helped her dad secure a patent 10 years ago. Mira shook her head. You're unreal. No, he said, stepping closer. I'm just in love with a woman who keeps pretending she's not extraordinary. She didn't speak. She just reached for his hand and laced her fingers through his. Paris unfolded beneath them 5 days later in a blur of cobblestone streets, sunlit balconies, and midnight walks along the Seine. Darren had booked the penthouse at a restored private residence overlooking the river, a place with carved wood ceilings and a rooftop garden she called ridiculous, before spending every morning in it with coffee and bare feet. They danced at a diplomatic reception under chandeliers older than both of them. She wore a navy gown that whispered when she moved and laughed too loudly when he whispered something inappropriate in her ear. People stared, then turned away, unsure what to make of the Whitmore CEO with the woman who didn't fit their social formulas. He didn't care. Neither did she. But it wasn't the glamour that changed everything between them. It was the morning they got caught in a downpour just outside Montmartre. Mira had been arguing with a vendor over a bundle of lavender when the sky cracked open. Vendors scattered, tourists shrieked, and Darren grabbed her hand and pulled her beneath the stone archway. They were soaked in seconds. You should have let me haggle, she shouted over the rain. I was trying to save your shoes. They're 10 years old. He laughed, the kind of laugh that broke loose from somewhere forgotten. She blinked at him, then started laughing too. And just like that, the world narrowed to them. He kissed her hard, water streaming between them, thunder rolling somewhere distant. Her fingers curled into the lapels of his jacket, and neither of them cared who was watching. Later, inside the warm hush of their suite, she curled against his chest and said, I'm not afraid anymore. Of what? He asked, brushing her damp hair from her face. Of being swallowed by your life. You're not inside my life, he murmured. You were my life. The trip ended too soon, but something had changed. Back in New York, she moved into his penthouse without ceremony. No packed boxes. No dramatic announcement. She just showed up with a duffel bag and a plant named Harold. He cleared space in his closet. She reorganized his kitchen. And one evening, weeks later, she came home to find him pacing the living room, nervously turning something in his hand. You're not pacing, she said, dropping her bag. You hate pacing. I know. Are you sick? No. Did someone die? Not unless you say no. She froze. What? He crossed the room and held out the small velvet box. Inside, a ring glinted in the low light, simple and timeless. I didn't plan a rooftop or a flash mob or a rented orchestra, he said, because none of that ever mattered to you. But you matter to me, Mira, more than anything I've ever built or bought or dreamed of. Her throat worked. I want to marry you, he said. Not because it makes sense on paper, not because it looks good in photos, because you are my before and after, my only. Tears burned in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She just said, yes. The wedding wasn't in a cathedral or a ballroom. It was in a garden behind an old bookstore in the village, with lanterns strung between trees and music played by a trio of street performers Darren had tracked down from their first date night. She wore a dress she'd found in a second-hand shop. He wore a suit he'd had made while she was asleep in Paris. Grant officiated, crying halfway through. They kissed before the words were finished. And when the first fireflies sparked above the garden, Darren looked at the woman beside him, the woman he'd met at a crosswalk, holding coffee and fury, and knew, without a doubt, he hadn't just found love. He'd found home. The first real challenge in their marriage came not with shouting or slammed doors, but with silence. Darren stood in the sleek kitchen of their Tribeca penthouse, the morning sun glinting off steel and marble, watching the steam rise from 2 untouched mugs of coffee. He glanced at the time. Mira was late. Again. She'd taken on a new role at the downtown gallery, a curatorial consultant position that had seemed temporary at first, but had quickly evolved into something far more integral and far more demanding. He didn't resent it. He'd encouraged her to take it. But lately, their time had become rationed, their conversations brief. The glitter of their wedding hadn't faded. It had just been layered beneath responsibilities, deadlines, and the quiet chaos of 2 people trying to hold on to something rare in the middle of lives full of noise. The elevator chimed. He turned as she stepped in, cheeks flushed, her canvas bag slung over one shoulder and the wind still in her hair. She stopped short when she saw him. "I thought you had your finance committee thing this morning. I moved it." She exhaled and set her bag down. "I lost track of time." "I'm sorry." He crossed his arms. "You missed our breakfast meeting. Again." "I know. I'm not mad," he said, cutting her off gently. "I just miss you." That quiet truth hung between them. Mira stepped closer, her voice low. "I didn't expect the gallery to grow like this. They asked me to lead the entire East Wing redesign. And I said yes." Darren didn't flinch. "Then we'll figure it out." She blinked. "Just like that. I didn't marry you to keep you in a box." His eyes searched hers. "But I need us to be part of this together. Not racing on parallel tracks." She nodded slowly. "I want that too." He stepped forward and pressed his forehead to hers, breathing her in. "We'll recalibrate. We always do." That evening, they did something absurdly simple. They stayed in. No penthouse rooftop dinners, no silent car rides to black tie events. Just takeout from her favorite Thai place, a dusty bottle of wine from the cellar they'd forgotten they even had, and a movie they never finished because they kept pausing to talk. They talked about things that hadn't come up in weeks. Her plans for the gallery's new exhibit. His surprise acquisition of a Swiss design firm. What it might look like to slow down a little. Travel without a purpose. Build something that didn't need to be scaled, sold, or shown off. "I've been thinking," Mira said, curled into the corner of the couch. "That building on 6th, the brownstone that's for sale? The one with the ivy-covered balcony?" She nodded. "It's been sitting empty for months. I keep walking past it and imagining. Place that's ours. Not just mine or yours. A place where we make the rules. We just moved in here a year ago." "I know. But this place, this is you." "It always has been." Darren didn't argue. He didn't need to. He knew exactly what she meant. He set down his glass. "Then let's go see it tomorrow." She tilted her head. "You're serious? I want a place where we can start slow again. Where no one expects anything but us." They bought the brownstone 2 weeks later. It wasn't perfect. The roof needed work, the floors creaked, and half the kitchen cabinets couldn't close properly. But it was theirs. And for the first time in months, they had something to build together with their own hands. They traded suits and stilettos for paint-splattered jeans and mismatched work boots. Mira designed the sunroom herself, filling it with hanging plants and a window seat. Darren pretended not to fall asleep in every afternoon. He turned the attic into a studio, a gift for her, though she used it more to read than to draw. They hosted weekend dinners with friends who didn't care about IPOs or gala invites. They argued over wallpaper, laughed until they cried when the plumbing exploded mid-renovation, and kissed in the middle of dusty hallways like teenagers who had no idea what they were doing. One rainy afternoon, she found him in the back garden, crouched beside a patch of dirt. He looked up, mud on his jaw, and said, "I think this is where the roses should go." "I thought you hated roses." "I hated the ones my mother planted." "These are yours." She knelt beside him. "You're full of surprises. I married you. That was the biggest one. Years passed, but they didn't drift. They expanded. In the spring, after a late frost and a sleepless night, Mira sat at the edge of their bed, holding a test in shaking hands. Darren found her there, staring at it like it might vanish. He knelt in front of her, took it from her hands without a word, and smiled. They named her Elodie. She had Mira's eyes and Darren's quiet focus. She learned to walk in the back garden, her tiny hands brushing against the roses. They built her a swing that hung from the old oak tree, and on warm nights, when the world felt too loud, the three of them would sit on the porch steps, wrapped in quilts, watching the sky. One evening, as Elodie slept inside and the stars blinked above them, Mira turned to him. "I used to think your world would swallow mine." He reached over, brushing his thumb across her cheek. "We built a new one." "You still feel like a surprise," she whispered. He kissed her temple. "You still feel like my home." And in that quiet, ivy-covered brownstone, surrounded by laughter, paint stains, and the kind of love that didn't need to be proven, Darren and Mira lived the rest of their days not as a power couple or a headline, but as two people who had chosen each other again and again without hesitation, without regret. Exactly as it was always meant to be.